Hey guys, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. My name is Laura, for those of you that do not know, and today we are going to be doing a book talk on All Your Perfects by Colleen Hoover. And now, if you're a fan of my channel, if you watch me regularly, you probably know that I am a big fan of Colleen Hoover, and I always read her books almost as soon as they come out. For some reason, I waited a few months to read this one. The only thing people have been telling me about this book is that it made them bawl their eyes out, so I've been a little wary, but I finally read it last night. I read it in one sitting, and I absolutely loved this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was so wonderful. I was like, yes, Colleen, especially after her last book came out, which was Without Merit, and I really wasn't a huge fan of that book. So to have this as her next book just like really made me so excited because the book was fantastic. I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of a non-spoiler type situation in the beginning of the video, but then I'm gonna go ahead and talk about spoilers later on, so I'll warn you to leave before the spoilers start. But this book follows two characters, Quinn and Graham, and their unlikely relationship. The story is told in alternate chapters, which are then and then now. The then being when Quinn and Graham meet, and the now being 7 years later when they are unhappily married. And I think that's really all I want to tell you guys. I mean, I think Colleen Hoover does a much better job of explaining the story, you know, through the book. And I don't want to take that away from her because I feel like going into her books, you just got to know like the bare minimum. And I think I say that for most of her books. I think just knowing the bare minimum, just trusting in Colleen Hoover and reading the book is the best way to go about it. The only thing I knew going into the book is the same thing, that it was about a married couple. I feel like a lot of her other books deal with like high schoolers or like just college age, and to read a book about like a marriage I thought was so different for her, but it was so great and I loved it so much. I know a lot of people in the past have had problems with Colleen Hoover's books and different problematic aspects of them. Personally, reading this book, I think it is probably one of her least problematic books that I have read. I mean, maybe I'm just not reading as critically as everybody else. Maybe somebody's gonna leave a comment telling me that this is her most problematic book. I don't know, but I didn't really find any issues with it. Of course, if you found issues with it, I want to hear all about it down below. Let me know your thoughts on the book, obviously. But I thought it was just told really well, and Colleen did a great job with the circumstances and the situations and everything that goes on in this book. I think she did a fantastic job covering. I'm telling you right now that if you've been a fan of Colleen's books in the past, that this one will not disappoint. It has that same super fun writing style, great characters, crazy plots, and it's just great. It's just a perfect Colleen Hoover book. So I hope you guys will go ahead and check this out. It is a bit of a sad one as well, I guess I will warn you. Everybody told me that I was gonna literally bawl my eyes out reading this book, and for some reason I didn't. And usually I'm like the biggest baby, cries at movies, cries at books, commercials, like a dog walking down the street, like anything. Like, I love to cry. So the fact that I didn't cry with this, I don't know if that's telling of anything, but it definitely did have some sad spots, but it was so good and I really recommend it. So I hope that you guys will go check out the book if you haven't already. I really recommend it, and then you can come back and watch the rest of this video. But for now, we're just gonna get into spoilers. So like I said previously, going into this book, I really didn't know anything besides the fact that it followed a married couple. That's literally it. So when we got in a few chapters and started learning about Quinn's infertility, I was so heartbroken, and I was just like, oh no, like this is what the book is. Like, I'm so sad for her and her, you know, issues with this. I mean, so many women struggle with infertility, and I feel like it's not talked about enough. Like, as a child growing up, you kind of just assume that people get pregnant and have babies, and it's like you see 16-year-old girls on TV having babies and getting pregnant on accident, yet there's women like Quinn and like a lot of other real women who actually struggle with this and can't have kids. And it's so heartbreaking to see, you know, a couple that all they want is to have kids, and there's so many kids out there that need homes, and it's just not that easy. You can't just like get the kids that need to be adopted or just like have kids. Like, it's so much more complicated than that. And I was so excited to see Colleen cover this topic because I feel like it's not talked about enough, and I haven't read anything like this. So I was super excited to see that this is what the book was going to follow. Again, a super heartbreaking story, but definitely an important one. I guess starting out with the characters in this book, Quinn and Graham were such a delight to read from, even the sad parts, even the harsh parts. I really enjoyed both of their characters for the most part. I think Colleen Hoover has a way with her characters, and she has all these like funny little characteristics she gives plays them, or like different jokes that they tell. And it's like you can read Colleen Hoover's humor, like if you actually follow Colleen on like social media, if you've ever met her. She's a very funny person, and you can always see her humor coming in through her characters. Especially Graham, I really enjoyed his sense of humor, and I was so happy to see like another funny, happy-go-lucky character who's very similar to Warren from Maybe Someday. He isn't the main character, but he really reminded me of Warren, who is one of my all-time favorite Colleen Hoover characters. So it was super exciting to have him. I also really enjoyed Quinn. I know a lot of the book was spent with her kind of in this depression because of her infertility, but being in her mind and getting to read from her perspective really drove the story home, and I really did turn to love her at the end, and I loved both of them so much. I mean, regarding secondary characters, I feel like there weren't any that were super important. There was obviously the sisters on both sides and the mother. I think the relationship that Quinn had with her sister was really special in the fact that, you know, she would tell her every single month if she wasn't pregnant, and they had this special bond over disliking their mother, which I thought was super funny and probably relatable to a lot of sisters. So I liked that a lot. There wasn't any like super standout-ish secondary characters to me though, but I don't think there needed to be. So the book starts out with Quinn going to visit her then fiance a day early. She goes upstairs to the apartment, and there she finds Graham pacing in front of the door because his girlfriend is in there with her fiance. And it was like the most ridiculous thing ever. I was like reading it like, what is going on? Like, this is insane. Basically Graham like explains the situation to her, and like I feel like if that was me, I would have either like busted in, I would have like left, like I wouldn't have sat there with this guy whose girlfriend is in there with my fiance. Like, it was just such a ridiculous situation, but I feel like it was such a tell of like the characters and how they react to certain situations. And I thought it was so funny that they just decided to like sit there, and then the Chinese food came and they were like pissed, so they started eating the Chinese food. I thought that was so funny. And then obviously eventually they opened the door, and it was just like the most awkward thing ever. I was so relieved to see that Quinn wasn't even gonna deal with him. She wasn't gonna go back to him. She wasn't gonna talk to him. That made me really happy. I was really nervous, especially because I didn't know anything going into the book, that this was gonna be some story where she like goes back to her cheating husband who like was literally just having sex with this girl in the apartment, and like I did not want that. So I was really relieved when that wasn't the story. And we started getting the later chapters where they're actually married. I didn't know that's how the story was going to play out, but I actually really enjoyed the format of that. It was super heartbreaking though sometimes. Like, it would be some super intense scene from like, you know, the current time, and then it would go back to them like being so cute and flirting and like on their first date and like going to his mom's house, and then it goes back to like her crying in the shower alone, and it's like so sad. I feel like it was a really effective way to tell the story though, and it really kept me wanting more because I was like always waiting for that next alternate chapter, if you know what I mean. I did say earlier that I did read the book in one sitting, which is usually the case for me with Colleen Hoover's books. Her books just have a way of carrying themselves that I need to keep reading them. I can't stop. So yeah, I did really like the format that she went with. The chapters that are the then, where they're like finally starting to get to know each other and they see each other at that restaurant, and then they finally start being together, I thought was so cute. I feel like some people might think that it was kind of like love at first sight-ish because they become so enthralled with each other within like a week after that, you know, 6-month period where they don't see each other. And I feel like a lot of people could interpret that as unrealistic, but I just thought it like drove the point home that they were so crazy about each other, and I really enjoyed it. It was just so sad to go from like this super happy, excited couple who's like madly in love to what they became 7 years later. And you know, seeing Quinn dodging Graham's like kisses on her cheek and like crying in the shower, it was just so heartbreaking to see her deal with this and like not telling him, you know, how she was truly feeling. She goes through so much, and I mean, having this issue is so real and so just heartbreaking, and I couldn't even imagine being in her shoes and feeling so alone. And I just wish she would have talked to Graham more, because as you can see at the end of the book, he was so much more understanding than she ever thought he was. So it just breaks my heart that she didn't reach out and she just let their marriage kind of spiral. The scene was kind of graphic, but I wanted to talk about it. The scene where they're having sex and she knows that she's ovulating, and Graham can kind of tell that she's not in it for him, and he pulls out. And she immediately just like crumbles and cries because her only hope is in that would make a baby, you know what I mean? And like, it was so sad to just see him walk out of the room. He's fed up with her, she's fed up with like living because she's so sad that she can't have a baby. And it was just so intense and sad, like from both of their perspectives, honestly. Like, he's losing his wife and she's never gonna have a baby, and it's like both of them are sad for different reasons. And it was just like such a heartbreaking scene. That was probably the one that I like almost cried at, because it was like so sad. Like, that's all I can say. It was so sad. Later on in the book, when we see that her sister becomes pregnant and tells her on the phone, and she kind of breaks a little bit, but she knows that she has to be strong. That was so heartbreaking. Another aspect of this whole infertility issue that was super heartbreaking was the fact that they were having trouble with adoption agencies because of Graham's past, the mistake that he made, you know, driving drunk, and his friend sadly dies, which is like really upsetting. It was clearly a mistake, and I'm sure he's learned from it, but it's just so sad that something like that can keep you from adopting a baby. And it's something that's like, you never know. It was kind of like a freak accident. And he even says like he wasn't that drunk, or it wasn't his fault and whatever, but he can't help but think like, what if I wasn't as drunk as I was, or what if I was paying more attention? Like, you just can't stop thinking about those things. And it's so crazy that something that you did when you were 19 is now holding you back from this opportunity of having a child. And now this is kind of on a random side note, but I don't know if any of you guys watch Shannon Rose here on YouTube. She's like a lifestyle beauty YouTuber, but her and her husband Travis have actually been trying to conceive for so long. They've gone through like every single struggle that was in this book. It was so relatable. She wasn't able to adopt because she has a past in the adult entertainment industry, and her and her husband actually did get pregnant but suffer a horrible miscarriage in which she had an ectopic pregnancy, which is obviously not viable. We see that in the book as well, which I will explain after this. But Shannon is now having a baby in a few weeks. She's like 9 months pregnant basically. She's going to be having the baby very, very soon. So she did get IVF transfer and it did hold, and she's having a girl, which is so exciting and happy. I mean, some people get their happy ending like that. Clearly we don't see the same type of happy ending in the book, but it's just so crazy how similar the two stories were. I was just wondering if any of you guys know Shannon. She's somebody that I really enjoy watching, and seeing like normal people like her and her husband struggle with this issue, you know, very similar to the book. It's so crazy that so many women probably go through this, and it's so heartbreaking. I guess moving on from that to kind of like the miscarriage affair part of the book, that was so super heartbreaking, and I could kind of see it coming from a mile away. Like, Graham was just getting kind of fed up. I knew something was bound to happen. The fact that he kissed this woman from his office, it was just so sad and ridiculous. Quinn like watches him wipe his mouth and wipe his neck and fix his tie in the car, and it's just like, how sad can you be? Like, you're already in this horrible place because you can't get pregnant, and now your husband is out cheating on you, and he doesn't even try to deny it. He walks in the door and she's like, tell me her name, and he's like, it's Andrea. And it's so sad to see that they've come to this place, especially when you're reading the alternate chapters and they were so happy and madly in love. It was just so disappointing. I'm not sure how much further it is from there, but then she also has the miscarriage, which ends up also being an ectopic pregnancy again, which is never viable and really harmful and could like kill somebody actually. So that's super scary. And then she ends up having to get that emergency surgery, I believe, to get her uterus or her fallopian tubes removed or something like that. I know that Shannon Rose had to get that surgery as well. So that just kind of throws everything out the window, because then you can't naturally conceive ever. You could try IVF again, but it's really hard, especially if you've tried it before and it didn't hold, or, you know, it's super expensive. So to see that and the heartbreak when he tells her that they had to remove her uterus, it was just like a punch to the gut. I think that part I also almost cried at, because it was just like, this whole book you kind of have that little inkling of hope that maybe she will get pregnant, and now we know that she can't get pregnant. And the fact that she did get pregnant, but it was an ectopic pregnancy and isn't viable, like, I was so heartbroken for her all over again. Like, it's just so crazy. Obviously we have this in the now, and then the then chapters are like them running away to Cape Cod to get married and not telling anybody because they're so in love and they just want to get married. And it's just like, oh my gosh, like if you were just reading the part about their marriage, you maybe might not feel as bad, but when you're reading about how much they truly loved each other, it's just so horrible. Obviously from here we have her going to Italy to visit her sister, and then Graham obviously shows up and they have that really intense conversation and end up opening the wooden box. The wooden box was referenced to a bunch of times during the book, but I didn't really know what it was, but it seemed to represent something for them. Like, he was like, you better be ready to open that box, like don't open the box. And it's like, what does that mean? And it was this placeholder for like, if we're gonna get a divorce, first we have to open the box, or on our 25th wedding anniversary, then we'll open the box. So reading all of the letters that he had written to her were so wonderful, and I was just, thank God, like thank God Graham thought of this early on, because imagine there wasn't a box. They probably would have just gotten divorced. But the box, like, and the letters, it truly saved them. And the fortunes, I was like so happy about the fortune. What did it say? It was like, if you shine on your perfections, it'll dim all your perfects, or something like that, which I loved. And I loved that they had this box of all these keepsakes and the letters, and it just made her realize why she fell in love with him. It made her realize that she didn't need a child if she had Graham. And it was just so perfect. And then them just reuniting after that. She no longer feels like sick to her stomach when she kisses him or is intimate with him in any way, and it was just such a relief to see them rebuilding their relationship. And you know, Graham had all the faith in the world in her the whole time, and she just didn't know. And Graham was always on her side, but she just didn't know. And knowing that she was gonna give him up so that he could have a chance at having a family, and he was willing to give her up so that she could have a family, but in reality they didn't need a family if they had each other. It was so perfect. Like, Colleen, come on, like it was so perfect. I loved it so much. Then we have the epilogue where it's 2 years later and they're doing so fantastic for themselves. They get the dog, you know, they're doing well, and they make that reference in the beginning of the book. He says like 10 years later, like we're gonna be laying in the same bed and I'll say I told you so, and then he does, and I was like, that's so like Colleen Hoover. Like, do you guys know what I mean? Like, it's so something she does. So perfect, a great ending. I also wanted to point out, for those of you that maybe didn't see it, or maybe you haven't read Hopeless or Finding Cinderella and you just didn't notice, but there is a Hopeless Easter egg in All Your Perfects, and I read it and I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, are we talking about this person? So if you haven't read Hopeless or Finding Cinderella and you don't want to be spoiled, I'll put a little picture on the screen. When it goes away, then you can resume the volume if you don't want to be spoiled. But basically, in All Your Perfects, Quinn's sister mentions an exchange student from Texas who is in Italy, and her name is Seven, but she goes by Six. And obviously that is Six from Hopeless, more noted for her novella, which is Finding Cinderella. And in her novella, I'm really foggy in this because I read it so long ago, but somebody pointed this out to me today. But Six gets pregnant and gives her baby up for adoption, I believe. So I think a lot of people were kind of wondering, like, I wonder if like she gave it up for adoption, or she gave it like in a, you know, private adoption situation to Graham and Quinn, which would be like so incredible. And I feel like Colleen would have like added that if that were the case, but there's always the possibility and we can always dream. So I just thought that was such a cool thing that Colleen added to the book. I've never noticed Easter eggs in her book like that before. So when I saw that, I immediately was like, oh my God, that's so cool. I love when authors do stuff like that. So I thought that was really fun. But yes, overall the book was such an enjoyable experience, even if it was super sad. I loved the story. I'm so glad that Colleen is sharing this story and making, you know, infertility a more talked about thing. I feel like nobody talks about it, and it's something that needs to be a bit more normalized in society. So I was so happy with this book. Colleen Hoover, you've done it again. I really want to know what you guys' thoughts are on the book. Maybe you didn't like it as much as I did, or maybe you also loved it. I know a lot of you guys were telling me to read this book because you absolutely loved it. So definitely let me know your thoughts down below. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you did like it, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel down below. You can also click on my notification bell if you want to get notified whenever I post a new video. But other than that, I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I'll talk to you in my next video. Bye!